The moment my daughter guided me past the main table and pointed to the chair beside the gift table, I understood exactly what this party was going to be. "Mom can help here," Lydia said brightly, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. "She's good with details. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction, created by the Her Chains channel team, based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotions, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative." I looked at the chair, folding, metal, pushed tight against a stack of wrapped boxes and envelopes. No place card, no glass. Just a pen and a clipboard meant for keeping track of who brought what. "I'll be right back," Lydia added, already turning away. Then she stopped, leaned in, and lowered her voice just enough to sound reasonable. "The main table is for people who, represent success. I didn't want things to feel awkward. Awkward. That was the word she chose. A woman I didn't recognize smiled at me politely. "Are you with the catering?" "I'm her mother," I said. Lydia heard it and laughed softly. "She's helping tonight," she repeated, as if that explained everything. "My name is Margaret Holloway. I am 70 years old. I have spent 4 decades building the quiet systems that keep other people's celebrations running on time. None of that mattered in this moment. What mattered was that my daughter had decided where I belonged. I could have corrected her. I could have stood up and made a scene. I did neither. I sat, as guests drifted past, dropping envelopes into the box beside me. I smiled and thanked them. Someone asked where Lydia was registered. Someone else asked if I needed more tape. Lydia never looked back. When she returned, she crouched slightly, as if speaking to staff. "Oh, and try not to wander," she said. "It wouldn't look great if you were in the background of photos." "I understand," I replied. That seemed to satisfy her. She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked back to the table where laughter waited for her. I took out my phone. I didn't hesitate. I didn't reread it. I sent one message to Ruth Calder, the only person who would understand it immediately. 6.1 million. Cancel everything. Now. The phone vibrated once in my hand. I placed it face down beside the gift box and folded my hands in my lap. No one noticed. Not yet. Silence didn't come naturally to me. It was taught. Margaret. Don't correct her. My late husband used to murmur when Lydia was younger. She's sensitive. Later it became, let it go. She's stressed. Then, you know how she is. By the time Lydia was an adult, silence had turned into my assigned role. I learned that speaking made me difficult, and being quiet made me useful. "Mom," Lydia said once, years ago, when I questioned a decision she had already made, "you don't need to worry about things like that anymore. Let me handle it." I remember nodding. I remember smiling. I remember the relief on her face when I stepped back. That relief became familiar. At the party, as I sat beside the gift table, Lydia didn't check on me. She checked on the lighting, on the music, on who was sitting where. When a server leaned toward me and asked, "Are you managing the gifts?" Lydia answered from across the room. "Yes," she said. She volunteered. Volunteered. The word landed heavier than the chair. I watched her rehearse kindness the way some people rehearse apologies. Her smile was measured. Her tone practiced. When she spoke to guests, she tilted her head just enough to look gracious. When she spoke to me, she didn't bother. "You're fine there," she said later, passing by without stopping. It keeps things simple. Simple for whom? I realized then that this wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a slip. Lydia had decided my position before the first guest arrived. The chair, the clipboard, the explanation she would give if anyone asked. She had learned something from me after all. She had learned that if you repeat a behavior long enough, people stop questioning it, and I had been repeating my silence for decades. I remembered every time I absorbed discomfort so she could shine. Every time I stood off to the side so she could feel centered. I had mistaken endurance for love. I had confused restraint with wisdom. Across the room. Lydia laughed at something Evan said. She didn't look in my direction. I lowered my eyes to the clipboard in front of me and rested my hand over my phone. It was still face down, still quiet. For the first time in years, staying silent wasn't about keeping the peace. It was about letting the truth arrive on its own terms. Once I stopped watching Lydia, the noise around me began to sharpen. Final confirmation goes through tonight, a man near the bar said, his voice low but urgent. We're clear for morning distribution, another replied. As long as nothing changes. Nothing changes. I had heard that phrase before. A woman approached the gift table and placed an envelope carefully into the box. Is this where the guarantor is sitting? She asked, glancing toward the main table. No, her companion said quickly. That's Lydia. Her mother just helps out. Just helps out. Evan passed by with 2 investors at his side. He glanced at me, then looked away as if he hadn't seen me at all. His jaw tightened. His pace quickened. The avoidance was deliberate. And that told me more than any conversation could have. A young staff member stopped in front of me, holding a tablet. Excuse me, she said politely. Should we delay the announcement until the confirmation clears? Before I could answer, Lydia appeared at her shoulder. She doesn't handle that, Lydia said smoothly. I do. The staff member flushed. I'm sorry. I was told I've got it, Lydia repeated, her smile thin. She turned to me only after the girl walked away. They get confused sometimes. She said, too many people involved. I nodded. The way I always had, but my attention had shifted. Conversations overlapped now, forming a pattern I recognized too well. Timelines. Release windows, penalties for delays, words that didn't belong at a family party unless something else was moving underneath it. My phone vibrated again. This time, I glanced at the screen without lifting it from my lap. Awaiting authorization. Final window closes tonight. I turned the phone face down again. Across the room. Lydia raised a glass and tapped it lightly, testing the sound. Evan leaned in and whispered something to her. She frowned, then smoothed her expression before anyone could notice. This wasn't a celebration. It was a checkpoint. They hadn't seated me beside the gift table because I didn't matter. They had seated me there because something did, and they needed me quiet until it was done. The gifts kept coming. Name a woman asked, handing me a box wrapped in linen paper. Margaret, I said, writing carefully on the card. Thank you for coming. She hesitated. You're very organized, she added, almost surprised. I've had practice. Across the room, Lydia accepted compliments like currency. You pulled this together beautifully, someone told her. It was a lot, Lydia replied, laughing lightly. But worth it. Evan stood close to her shoulder, nodding, scanning faces. He didn't look at me, not once. A waiter leaned toward me with a stack of envelopes. Where should these go after we log them alphabetical? I said, and separate anything handwritten. He smiled with relief. Thank you. No one else seemed to know. Lydia heard that. She's good at that kind of thing, Lydia said quickly. Stepping between us. Details. Details. That was what my life had been reduced to. The quiet work no one wanted credit for. Only results. My phone buzzed again. I recognized the rhythm before I read the message. Ruth Calder never wasted words. We are inside the final window, awaiting your authorization to proceed. I let the screen dim without replying. Ruth and I had met more than 20 years ago, when I was still signing checks in my own handwriting, when no bank would touch a regional logistics firm run by a woman with no appetite for spectacle. I had personally guaranteed the funding then. Every warehouse lease, every transport contract, every risk that allowed other people to build on top of it. Margaret. The banker had warned me at the time, sliding the papers across the desk. If this fails, it all falls on you. I understand, I said, and signed anyway. Tonight was built on those signatures. A guest leaned toward Lydia and said, "It must feel incredible to finally see everything come together." Lydia smiled wider. It's been a long road. It had been, just not hers. I placed another envelope into the box and closed the lid gently. My phone vibrated once more, then went still. Ruth would wait. She always did, without my confirmation. Nothing could activate, not the schedules, not the releases, not the guarantees everyone here was celebrating. I folded my hands in my lap and kept my expression neutral. The work I was still doing was not the kind that required applause. It only required patience. Lydia approached the gift table with something folded in her hand. She didn't sit. She didn't smile. "Mom," she said, keeping her voice light, "I need a quick signature." She placed the paper on the edge of the table, right beside the envelope box, as if it belonged there. As if this were just another task I'd been assigned. "What is it?" I asked. "Routine," she said immediately. "Just a confirmation form. The lawyers want everything tidy before the announcement." I unfolded it slowly. Lydia watched my face, not the paper. The language was familiar. Not the words exactly, but the structure. Conditional liability, indemnification. A clause that shifted responsibility quietly, efficiently, to the person whose name appeared at the bottom, mine. "This isn't routine," I said. Lydia's smile tightened. "It is. You're just not used to how things work now." I scanned the page again. The phrasing was careful, deliberate. It wasn't a request for approval. It was a transfer of exposure. "I'm not signing this," I said, and folded it back along its original crease. For a moment, Lydia said nothing. Then she exhaled sharply, the way she did when patience felt like a burden. "Mom," she said, lowering her voice, "this is not the time. For what? For questions, for concerns, for whatever this is." She gestured vaguely at the paper. "Everyone's waiting." I placed the document back on the table between us. "They'll have to keep waiting." Her eyes flicked to the room, then back to me. No tears, no pleading, just calculation. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "I'm making it accurate." She straightened. "We don't have space for complications tonight." I met her gaze. "Then you shouldn't have brought this to me." For the first time, irritation slipped through her composure. Not hurt, not disappointment, annoyance. She reached for the paper, snatched it back, and tucked it under her arm. "Fine," she said. "We'll deal with it later." Later, I thought. When the window had closed, when the responsibility had already shifted, she walked away without another word. I returned my attention to the gift box and picked up my pen again, my hand steady. Somewhere behind me, Lydia was explaining something to Evan in a low, urgent tone. She hadn't come to ask for my support. She had come to secure my name. $6.1 million is not a number you announce at a party. It is a number that sits quietly in contracts and deadlines, waiting for someone to forget what it represents. It was 3 warehouses spread across 2 states. It was reserved capacity, locked routes, and penalties that triggered automatically if a launch missed its window. It was insurance bonds, personal guarantees, and clauses written to protect everyone except the person whose name was last on the page. Mine, Margaret. Ruth Calder had said to me years earlier, sliding a thick folder across my desk, "If we do this, it has to be airtight. It will be." I told her, "I'll stand behind it." I had meant that then. At the party, I could hear the tension creeping into voices. "We're still good for the morning," a man asked Evan. trying to sound casual. Yes, Evan said quickly. Everything's locked. Locked was a generous word. My phone buzzed again. Sharper this time. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. The final window was narrowing. Once it closed, routes would be reassigned, storage released, and penalties applied without discussion. Lydia passed near the gift table, her smile fixed, her eyes searching my face for something. Relief. Compliance. Silence? I gave her none of it. $6.1 million also meant leverage. Not the loud kind. The kind that works precisely because no one notices it until it's gone. A guest leaned toward me and said kindly, "You must be proud of your daughter." "I am," I replied, in different ways. Across the room, Lydia raised her glass again, preparing to speak. Evan leaned in and whispered urgently. Her expression tightened for a fraction of a second before smoothing over. They had built the entire evening around a timetable they assumed I would honor without question. The speeches, the announcements, the confidence, all of it depended on my silence. I rested my hand over my phone, feeling the steady weight of it against my palm. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. It wasn't even about Lydia. It was about correcting a mistake I had allowed to grow unchecked. I turned the phone face up. The screen was waiting. The first guests didn't announce their departure. They simply checked their phones, exchanged glances, and drifted toward the exits with practiced politeness. Evan noticed before Lydia did. His phone rang once. He silenced it. Then again, he stepped away from the table, his shoulders stiff, his smile gone. I watched him pace near the bar, nodding too often, saying very little. "No, that can't be right," he said quietly. We were cleared. A woman Lydia had been laughing with leaned close and whispered something in her ear. Lydia's laugh faltered mid-breath. "What do you mean?" delayed Lydia asked, her voice still pleasant but sharp around the edges. "That doesn't make sense." She scanned the room, her eyes finally landing on me. I was still seated by the gift table, my hands folded, my expression unchanged. A server hurried past and murmured to another, "They're saying the confirmation didn't go through. That's impossible." The other replied, "Everything was scheduled." The music cut out abruptly, leaving a hollow silence that stretched a second too long. Someone cleared their throat. The music resumed, louder than before, as if volume could cover uncertainty. Evan's phone rang again. He answered this time. "Yes," he said. Then, "No, she hasn't." He stopped, lowered his voice. "I'll handle it." Lydia approached him, her composure slipping. "What's happening?" she demanded under her breath. Evan shook his head once. "Not here." More guests left. A few avoided eye contact with Lydia. Others offered vague excuses about early mornings and long drives. The gift table stopped filling. Then the room shifted. Thomas Keene entered without announcement. He didn't pause to take in the decorations or greet the hosts. His gaze moved across the space with quiet purpose, settling briefly on Evan, then Lydia. Before finding me, relief crossed his face, followed immediately by confusion. "There you are," he said, walking straight past the main table. Lydia turned, startled. "Thomas." He didn't slow. He stopped in front of me and looked down at the folding chair, the clipboard, the gift box beside it. His expression tightened. "Margaret," he said calmly. "Why are you sitting here, Thomas?" Keene did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Margaret," he said again, extending his hand to me as if this were the most natural place in the room for us to meet. "I've been looking for you." I stood, smoothing my jacket. "Thomas, I didn't realize you were coming." "I wasn't planning to," he replied, his eyes moving briefly to the gift table, the clipboard, the folding chair, but I was told there was a delay. The word landed like a dropped glass. Lydia stepped forward quickly. Thomas, this is just a temporary seating arrangement. My mother prefers something quieter. Thomas turned to her. Polite, but unmoved. Does she? Evan cleared his throat. There's been a minor technical issue. Nothing to be concerned about. Thomas nodded once, then looked back at me. Margaret, are you overseeing the confirmation tonight? I said, until I wasn't. The room had gone very still. Conversations faded. People leaned without meaning to. Thomas's expression sharpened. Then nothing is active. Lydia laughed too quickly. That's not true. Everything was finalized. Thomas didn't argue with her. He reached into his jacket and removed his phone. My firm does not proceed without Margaret Holloway's authorization. He said evenly. That was a condition from the beginning. Faces around us shifted. Recognition spread in small, startled movements. Evan swallowed. Thomas, there must be some misunderstanding. There isn't. Thomas replied. He turned to me. Margaret. I met his gaze. I withdrew my support. He nodded, as if confirming something he had already suspected. Then my firm will do the same. Lydia's smile collapsed. You can't be serious. I am, Thomas said. Effective immediately, a murmur rippled through the room. Someone stepped back. Someone else checked their phone. Thomas glanced once more at the folding chair. You should not have been seated like staff, he said, not unkindly. That position is reserved for people without authority. He turned away then. Already dialing another number, the music didn't come back this time. Lydia stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Evan stared at the floor, and for the first time that night, every eye in the room understood exactly who had been in control all along. Lydia found me near the service hallway, away from the guests she could no longer face. What did you do? She asked, her voice tight. Thomas won't answer my calls. I didn't block him. I said, he made his decision. You embarrassed me, she said, in front of everyone. I looked at her then, really looked. The confidence was gone. What remained was calculation edged with fear. You embarrassed yourself, I said calmly. Long before tonight. She shook her head. You always do this. You wait. You stay quiet. Then you pull the ground out from under me. I stopped holding it up. I replied, that's not the same thing. Her breath hitched. You knew what this launch meant. You knew what was at stake. I knew exactly what was at stake, I said. That's why I didn't sign anything. Her eyes flicked away. That paper was standard. It transferred liability. I said, to me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth settled between us. I'm your daughter, she said finally. You don't do this to family. I didn't. I said, you did. Her voice dropped. If this falls apart, I'm exposed. The guarantees, the penalties, I can't cover them. I know, I said. Silence stretched. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that forces decisions. What do you want? She asked. Biggie. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. From this moment on, we don't blur lines. No assumptions, no access, no paperwork slid across tables. She stared at me. You're cutting me off. I'm setting terms, I said. The same ones I give everyone else. Her shoulders sagged. So that's it. That's the correction, I said. She swallowed hard. You're treating me like a client. I'm treating you like an adult, I replied. Clients earn support. Children receive it. Lydia nodded slowly, as if repeating the words to herself. The understanding arrived not with relief, but with weight. For the first time, she wasn't angry. She was counting. The launch never happened. By morning, the contracts had been voided quietly, the kind of cancellation that leaves no room for negotiation. The logistics window closed. The guarantees expired. What had been announced with champagne the night before was reduced to a brief, Careful statement about unforeseen delays. Lydia called me before noon. They're saying I'm personally liable, she said. Her voice was thin, stripped of performance. The penalties, the storage fees, they're all pointing back to me. Yes, I said. That's how it works when your guarantor withdraws. You could fix this, she said. One call, one signature. I paused. Not to punish her, but to be precise. I won't. She arrived later that afternoon, eyes rimmed red, posture rigid. I handed her a single document across my desk. It wasn't a lecture. It wasn't a threat. A repayment schedule. Clear terms, clear boundaries. What is this? She asked. It's accountability, I said. Not as your mother. As someone who refuses to be used. She scanned the pages. You're treating me like a debtor. I'm treating you like an adult, I replied. Adults carry the consequences of their choices. There was no shouting, no apology speech, no attempt to repair something that had already been broken by design. When she left, she took the document with her. She didn't ask for a hug. I didn't offer one. That evening, I sat alone in my office and let the quiet settle. For years, I had confused love with endurance. I had believed that staying useful would keep me close. It didn't. It only taught others how far they could push. Here is the lesson I learned. And the one I carry forward now. Support is not owed. It is chosen. The moment respect disappears, support becomes damage. I shut down my computer, picked up my coat, and walked out without looking back. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose dignity over approval, tap like, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. I chose self-respect over reconciliation. If someone treated you like a servant, would you still feel obligated to save them?